Perfect.
I think we
It
can all
shouldn't.
hear each other. That's good.
You can hear. Good work. Thanks, Daniel, for the sound check. So what we'll do today is we'll run through a few bits and pieces. I've put chat is open on the side. So Andrew, the spectacular thing called chat that occurs down the side of the meeting there. Normally when you have a big, massive group of people and teams, everyone will write like, oh, kudos to Georgina. That was a great comment. And all this stuff starts to happen along the sides there. But with 3 people, it might not get as exciting. So if you need to leave for some reason, feel free to duck off and go or come back as need be. And also, because there's only like 4 of us on board, feel free to ask questions along the entire way. We'll fill you in on who we are and what we do and all that standard kind of stuff as well. And it shouldn't go for the full hour, but I've allocated that in case all 40 of the people who said they were going to come did turn up and had some juicy questions that we had to get into. But for the sakes of Carla, David and Andrew who have joined us, and whoever the other phone number is, which I'm not sure if they're listening or not, please feel free to ask as we're going along. Like, it's not a formal, you don't have to raise your hand up like we're in school again and say, hey, I have a question, just ask. And if you need to turn your camera off for any reason, just do it. Like, we're all adults, old enough and ugly enough to manage. So yeah, feel free to do it accordingly. Does anyone have any pressing issues before we get started? No?
Don't think so.
You guys are looking at each other, Andrew.
We've had a work incident last week, so do you want to explain the work incident? We've had an injury at work, and it has to do with a machine.
Okay.
One of my workers rolled an excavator over. So,
is he a subcontractor or he's directly employed for you?
Directly employed.
Okay, and is he okay?
He's fine.
Yeah. Lucky.
Very, very, very lucky he came out unscathed. He has no broken bones. He's got no torn ligaments. He has bruising. Bruising and swelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
what size of excavator was it?
2 ton. So not massive, but still it's like
it's enough.
Big enough.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So full cab or just a roll chassis?
No, just like ROPS, FOPS. So
Yeah.
open cab. Yeah.
It's therefore, but depending on the terrain, hey, yeah, that's right. Could have come out a little bit.
The thing. We sat down and like I don't have take 5s and stuff that are written or anything like that. We rock up and go, here's the job. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. So, but we were with a builder. And we said it.
Yeah.
So it was like a take 5 essentially, which we do every day on numerous times a day on all jobs. It's just not written down formally, which is not good enough. But yeah, I've always been a believer in just because it's on paper doesn't mean it's safe. So
yeah,
but it just doesn't hold up.
True.
But anyway, so like I've really struggled with OH and F because OH and S because I don't do anything stupid. Like I wouldn't put my boys in like there's dangers to the job, but I wouldn't anyway. So we did a take 5 and the builder actually noted it down. So I had that, but yeah. Anyway, we really need swims and I don't know, all the rest of the stuff that comes along with it. But he did what I asked him to do all the time, and then decided that he'd track this way, and he flipped the machine where he wasn't supposed to do it, and and that was that.
It's unfortunate, when an event does happen, but as you'll see as we'll talk through the slides and, from David and what he does in his job itself, the regulator does and doesn't require it on paper. Like when something happens, they'll be like, show us your documentation on how have you done X, Y, Z. But they also want to see from a practical perspective that you are giving that guidance, that supervision, that risk kind of management approach as well. So it's kind of like a happy medium. And that's what really we wanted to get across in this session today, that there is most definitely 100% a component of you do need to provide your workers with the guidance, et cetera, that's required. Unfortunately, there are still some legislated requirements when it comes to what you need to back up yourself. And that's what this session is about. There are some obligations workers have, but there are some for you as well that you need to know to cover your pants, so to speak, in a nice way to put it.
So from like
Yep.
sorry.
You're right.
Oh,
No,
I was
you
just
go.
going to say, from my experience with safe work method statements and JSAs and everything, here's the paper, tick, 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 sign, yeah, boom, throw it out,
100%.
chuck it in the front of the car, and just go
100%.
do your job. What was the
Yeah.
point?
Correct.
So the point is someone's
Yeah,
held
but it doesn't,
responsible.
and that was my thing. Like, what's the point?
That's very.
It's not
No,
worth
no.
anything. Not
It's
worth
You
the
have-
worth
paper.
a lot.
No,
It's
because
actually
people don't read it.
No,
They don't
it's
do that.
correct. It's
And no
correct.
one
And that,
cares. They just throw
that
it
is why
away.
David has a job. Like at the end of the day, this
That's
is
right.
why David exists and why there's a business like what David has. In
Yeah.
my experience, so my experience is, 17 years of boots on the ground, health and safety, providing it to businesses like yourself as well as bigger ones. Whether you're on a mine site, construction site, manufacturing site, it's exactly the same. Everyone has this knee-jerk reaction. We create a document that's 65 pages long. We don't think about the end user, which is you potentially, or another tradie that's going out. You might not even be able to understand half the lingo and terms that are chucked in this document. And potentially you might have paid 10 grand for a suite of documents that are as generic as Googling, how do I do X, Y, Z? It's not tailored to what you do. There was no consultation with your business. You have a non-fit for purpose document, and the regulator, if you give it to them as a safe work method statement for high risk construction work, will hold you accountable to that bit of paper that has nothing to do with anything. And unfortunately, because it's not user friendly, your guys, whoever it is that's using it, will literally be like, yep, done and dusted. And I bet if I walked around on those sites and asked them what was in that document, no way, Jose, would anyone be able to tell you, because it's not worth the paper it's written on. So this isn't one of those pro safety webinars. Both Daniel and I come from construction, different industries where we know what the guys on the ground are looking at. And David's nodding, so I presume he's agreeing with.
I'm 60 this year, and I only got into the industry when I was 15. So for 45 years, we've had to bring in a safe system of work, which a document proves exists.
Yeah.
Which is what the regulator wants to see. So it's to change the conversation if a business like yourselves does sadly experience an incident.
Yeah.
It changes the conversation and probably saves you from litigation. That we know, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think everybody else in the room agrees that a document does not change behaviour.
No, that's
right.
it.
But the conversation around a document does.
Yeah. And that's the aim.
The point. And that's the aim. Right.
Yeah. That's the aim.
It's having the document to have a good collaborative conversation at the start of a shift.
Yeah.
Without relying on the document. But if something happens where puppets the fan, you have a document to prove that you have a safe system of work that you've discussed as part of your deal. Because you do take fives. You do take fives every half an hour in our game.
Yeah.
We have to provide evidence that we've done them.
Yeah. No, anyway. But it just can't be. You can't consume, like for a small business like me, it just can't consume 90% of your day. Like
no, it can't. It takes that's money and time.
Fit for purpose system.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to start. Yeah, so 100%. And you'll see through this, we're going to talk about, the requirement to have documents and have things in place. So you will see that, yes, we will be going through what's required. Here we go. And it does mention documentation, but Daniel and I, the aim of this presentation is to give you that practical guidance. And I say practical because we all know in health and safety, sometimes it's not practical at all. But there are some things legislatively that are not practical as well. Like legislation says you must have X, Y, Z, and sometimes it's not, but you have to be able to work within the guidelines to find something that will work for your business and will keep your workers safe without costing you an arm and a leg, or taking half the day to get it done as well is the other thing that counts here. So an introduction, I guess, to what your obligations are, and apologies ahead of time because there is a bit of, the terminology and the lingo, but as I said, Daniel and I will aim to break it down for you. And if there's something you don't understand, please let us know. So who we are, obviously I'm Georgina, so I'm the Senior Associate here at Lydia Group. We are a consultancy firm, and it's not health and safety consultancy. We're a project management end-to-end firm that does everything from engineering, procurement, contracts management, all the way through to things like health and safety. So I lead up the team in the health and safety space. And as you heard me say, my background is roughly about 16 years of boots on the ground, embedded in organisations, wearing the high vis with my pink boots, getting dirty every day, doing jobs with the guys to understand how work is actually done in the field, and then translating that back. And I stepped out of that role about a year and a half ago because I was tired of having conversations in bigger organisations with managers that didn't see safety as a priority. So now in this role, I'm working with organisations like yourselves, but also the bigger ones, to help them influence and provide the adequate resources, I guess, that are needed to influence from a bottom level. In the team, we have 2 HSE advisors. So we have Daniel, who's online with us today, and we have another HSE advisor, Savio. And how we can help you, not only from holding these webinars and stuff as well, but as most people don't have the funds to pay for a full-time HSE resource. And it is a lot of money sometimes, depending on wages and what you think needs to happen. So where we come into it is there are 2 things we help with. If you don't have anyone at all to do a HSE kind of role, we can drop someone into a HSE advisor or an officer role for you, and they fulfill the requirements that you need. But as society is kind of changing and money, I guess, is getting tighter at the end of the day, people are coming to us more for that one-on-one type work just as required. So, hey, we've had an incident like you guys have had. Could you conduct an investigation for us and provide us with a report? And that's our scope of work done and dusted. And then say in 3 months from now, there's an injury management process you'd like us to set up. We come in and we do that scope of works and then step out of the business. So we're saving companies money by only using us on an ad hoc required basis, or just calling us for advice, which we're happy to provide regardless at no cost. You know, we just called and said, hey, Georgina, what do I do here? Happy to tell you what to do in those instances. So we help a variety of organisations, from small mum and dad businesses where we're writing whole, you know, safety health management systems. We're doing all sorts of things with them, all the way through to coming into a team of 65 professionals and doing all the fancy upper level kind of stuff as well. Daniel, have I covered everything we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. But that's largely what we're doing is filling roles, providing strategic support and helping roll out projects for large companies and as needed stuff for everyone else.
That's it. Perfect. So this lovely quote here is all about, we know that the boots on the ground roles, so your tradies, your guys out in the field getting down and dirty, are really there to do all the work. And they will do what's required to get the job done. And sometimes safety isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. And when you're running your business, more than likely, while we say we want safety to be your number one priority, I would rather it be part of your everyday job and not necessarily a priority, because priorities can be deprioritized. So we want to keep you alive as business owners, obviously, to provide for your families, your friends, etc. But we also want to keep your employees alive and well and safe. This presentation is aimed at you, though. So as the business owners are going through your obligations and your responsibilities under the Act. And when I say the Act, obviously we're in different states, but there is harmonised legislation in Australia, except for our lovely Victorian friends who decided the penalties and things that were occurring down there were much more greater than anywhere else in Australia, so decided they weren't coming on board. And WA only recently came on board as well after having an act that was made in 1984. So in true wait a while style, they've finally caught up with the rest of Australia, but Victoria does keep its own. Now, the only differences with the Victorian legislation, though, is the penalties and fines, and there may be some terminology changes. At the end of the day, what we've incorporated into this presentation, though, is the general across the whole of Australia. The requirements and obligations and duties are literally the same. And you'll see they're pretty simple to understand, and we should hopefully provide you with some better understanding of what they are, and some case studies and examples of how they have and have not kind of worked in various locations, if that makes sense. Can I just do a sense check to make sure I'm not talking too fast? You can all hear me and you can see what's on the screen.
Yep.
Good.
Perfect.
Yep.
And not
Thank you.
not
Good.
talking too fast?
No.
Okay, good. Because when I get passionate, I am known to get fast, and you can see I'm using my hands a lot. I know that you can probably only see the screen, perhaps. So please bear with me as I get through this. So first and foremost, has everyone seen the changes that have come through regarding psychosocial hazards, or does that mean anything to anyone? There is silence. Does that mean that nobody has heard of psychosocial hazards?
No.
Are you all? You haven't? Okay. What about
I
Carla? You haven't?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't.
Perfect. So legislation across the whole entire of Australia. So this is not specific to Brisbane, not specific to anywhere, recently changed with the Workplace Health and Safety Acts. So they were amended to incorporate what that fancy word means is mental health, basically. And how it impacts you is that now when people start mentioning, and I put this little picture in here because it's directly from Safe Work Australia, but it helps you as a business owner understand that if someone or yourselves, because I was reading some of these and thinking, man, you know, as a business owner, I would be saying, I feel really tired. I'm sick of it. I can't just stop, you know, doing it. These are things you would particularly say. But if your employees are also saying things like, I can't sleep thinking about it, or I don't really know what they want me to do, or this place is toxic, I'm burnt out, or I'm feeling stressed, that's actually a flag for what's termed as a psychosocial risk or something relating to mental health. That's the new fancy name for it under the legislation. And what's happened now is it is now a legislative requirement that businesses like each of you on the call today actually take into fact and take into place psychosocial risks and consider it as part of your business or undertaking. So when you do a risk assessment, when you go out to site, when you're writing documents, you need to be considering the risk of the mental health components. So things like, can your workers be stressed out? Is there repetitive tasks? Is there fatigue? And you know, what are the conditions that contribute to them feeling well and part of the workload? You know, is there too much happening? And then you have to think about what can you do as a business to not put those risks there in the first instance. How can you help them feel better about them? What controls can you put in place? So the psychosocial risk thing is current. Oh, it says people are waiting in the lobby.
I'll let people in if they jump in while you're talking.
Okay, super, thanks. Is the screen still being shared? Can you still see the presentation, or did I jump out of that then? I know it still
I can
says
see
it's being
your chats.
You
Cool.
jumped out.
There we go. Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah.
Super. So thanks, Daniel. So basically, psychosocial risks is mental health. In the construction trade space, there has been a lot of talk about this recently. You know, suicide rates, things with mental health, men, women not talking, etc. The main gist of this is it needs to be considered when you're talking about what procedures, what controls do I need to put in place when I own or start up a business. And they're things like making sure your rosters are adequate, making sure you have a means for if a worker is feeling down or you can tell that they might be suffering from ABC condition, that they don't look themselves, you know, that you've got something in place, whether it be you as a business owner checking in on them, asking if they're okay, allowing them the time to deal with whatever's going on at home, allowing them time to do their tasks accordingly. Those kinds of things are now legislated. It's always been legislated that you consider all the risks associated with your business, but in WA in recent times, there's been a lot of bullying, harassment and sexual kind of talk that came out of some mining inquiries that occurred. And so they've now made it an enforcement thing that it is now legislated that you do consider those risks and given it a title as opposed to saying all risks need to be considered. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Everyone's different, I guess.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Like some people can handle heaps more than others. So
Yeah,
all
it's
those-
not saying, yeah, and it's not saying that you have to cater for every single individual that is on your site. It's more saying that you have given it consideration, and it being mental health and psychosocial risks. So the things
So
that
it's not
go
like
along with that.
you have to write out a A4 piece of paper every time you have a conversation going, hey, mate, are you going all right?
No.
Yeah,
And
okay,
if you, the only reason you would be doing that is if, say, a worker had taken some sort of action, you know,
Yeah.
had made some sort of attempt, etc., and you want to document. And again, it's the old CYA. So you're covering your backside basically with, hey, these are the steps that I've taken to manage this employee appropriately. And if that's the case, it's not just psychosocial risk you should be doing that for, it's performance management, it's incident, you know, if he's had an incident or she's had an incident, then you would be taking notes on those. If you've got an injured worker, it's the same kinds of thing. But for example, Andrew, with you, you know, like old mate that rolled the excavator, checking in with him to make sure, because psychosocial stuff can happen down the track. So whilst he said, yeah, I'm all good, I'm back in it, I'm super, no worries, it's checking in a week's time and saying, hey, just checking everything's all right. If you need to talk to someone, you know, give him Lifeline's number, or, you know, like just it's that kind of thing. It's understanding, yes, and most likely he's going to say, no problems. That's great. But the fact that you actually considered it shows what we're about to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Which is something I'll be doing anyway and already thought of.
Of course.
When I get him back in the machine, it'll be like, you know, you got to get back in this, but are you going okay? Like,
Yeah. And sometimes it appears like 3 months down the track, he might be at home and all of a sudden he has a nightmare one night of, you know, I don't know, like rolling the excavator, or he's driving down the road 6 months later and has a flashback and it causes him to be stressed or something. So that's extreme circumstances, of course. Like I've never heard of that, you know, coming to fruition, but it's just being conscious that your workers do come to work with a whole heap of baggage that sometimes carries, you know, into their work. And if they have an incident, they can exacerbate it. But obviously, if they don't, even if they have no incident, you still need to be conscious of the baggage that is sometimes attached to each of us when we come to work that day.
Yeah.
Super. So what you're going to learn from this webinar is, obviously we'll give you an introduction and run through who has duties and what they are. And like I said, we'll run through as a business owner what your requirements are as a company, and then obviously what happens for the workers and what their requirements are. Just as a fun stat for you, 82% of businesses that we work with don't completely understand their legislated health and safety obligations and duties. So that's why we decided it would be great to just have a little webinar and perhaps maybe do a series of them that runs through what those obligations are in the first instance, and allow an open question thing as well for you guys. If you have any, you know, things you specifically want to know about, you know, feel free. So we're going to run through what these obligations are. I'm going to skip through this one. So I want to see if anyone knows. Carla, Andrew, David will already know the answer to this. If you are an owner or operator of a business, do you think you have obligations under the Act?
Yeah.
Yep, good work. And Carla and Andrew and David, I mean, David, you have a business as well. Do each of you make big decisions about all or part of the business?
Yes.
Yep, super. That's great. And can you affect your business's financial standing? So those decisions, the things you decide to do they have the ability to impact on turnover, revenue, costs, P&L, that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Right. So that basically means that all of you fall under what is known as an officer under the Act. So I'm just going to click on this little video and hopefully it will play accordingly from Safe Work. Here we go. Just let me know if you can't see it or hear it.
Okay.
Can you hear it?
No,
I
it's on
can hear it.
No.
Yeah, I can hear it. Sorry, can see it, can't hear it.
I'm just checking you can all hear that.
No, we can't hear it yet.
Interesting. Okay. That is not good at all. I don't know why you can't hear that.
I can see mute on your screen.
You can see mute on my screen.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, that's not my mouse.
that's-
Oh, don't.
Let me just, because I can hear it, but I'm not sure why you can't hear it.
Mm.
Is it coming out of your
Dan-
speaker or is it device setting?
Yeah. No, speaker. Let me just try one more trick. I might just unplug my headphones and let's see if that works for you. So just
Give
give
it a
me
go.
two. Let's see if this works. I'm just going to go back to our screen and I'll turn my headphones on.
You're right.
While we're waiting for this, how many people do you employ, Andrew, in your business?
All up, there's just the four of us. My wife, myself, and the two tradesmen and an apprentice.
Yeah.
Simple.
Sorry,
but
I'm referring only to you, Andrew. I don't know your wife's
It's all
name,
right.
so
yeah.
because she's more important. She's more important in the business than you are, right?
I'm Jess. My name's Jess.
Hi, Jess. How are you
She's
doing?
backbone.
Good, thanks. Well, look, I try and handle the office side of things, but I mean, I don't really have an office background. We're just doing
Winging it.
We're winging it, yeah. So,
Good on you.
yeah, like it just helps Andrew be out on the field more, being in the office and helping him out with like all the paperwork and all the background stuff. But yeah, like look, I don't have any experience in the trade. Really, we are winging it. That's
Yeah, well, I admire you for giving it a go.
Well, we just
Takes
sort
a lot
of
to make it work.
it just fell into it really. Like I just started a business and I needed it just I don't know, it just grew. And then I needed Jess to help me and then yeah.
yeah, Andrew started out as a sole trader, so it was a lot easier then. It's just a little bit more like there's a lot more litigation involved now that we're a company. So
Yeah.
this is just stuff
Well-
now that we have to learn.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you've taken the initiative to sit in on this webinar is a good indication of what you want to be doing. So maybe the video's ready to go now, Georgina. What do you
Yeah,
reckon?
I'm just going to try it now and see. I'll just quickly press it. Can you hear that?
No.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why can't you hear that? Doesn't make sense. Okay, what I'll do is I will share the link to the video. It is literally Safe Work Australia telling you all your responsibilities, which is what I'm going to be doing anyway. So I'm going to get rid of the video and just continue with the slide pack because it's what I was doing anyway. So let's go back to that. That's you guys seeing yourselves right now. Hey, let me just X out of that one. And you're going to need to know that one in a second, so bear that in mind. Here we go. All right. So as we said, if you have answered yes, congratulations, you didn't win a car. It just means you have legislative obligations under the Act. So specifically, your organisation, your company, and unfortunately, the little squirrels that put together legislation give your company the term PCBU, which is the person conducting the business or undertaking. At the end of the day, when I'm describing this to a group of students who, do certificate for and workplace health and safety, what I tell them is it's the name on the pay slip, so who pays your bills. But in your instance, it's the name of your company, what you've called your business. It's whatever your trading company is called. You are the PCBU. The organisation is the PCBU. So as a company, you have some obligations and as far as reasonably practicable. And those terms are very argumentative and very controversial, as we were saying, Andrew, as to whether or not something is practical. So the first duty as a business that you're required to do is to provide and maintain a work environment that is without risk to health and safety of workers. And I've included a picture of some really kind of dodgy looking housekeeping here on purpose, because that is one of the ways that you provide a work environment that is without risk to workers. Can Andrew, Carla, can you guys think of anything else that, potentially would mean the work environment is a bit risky or a bit shady?
Yeah, the people that you're working around.
Are a bit risky.
Oh, you laugh,
Definitely.
but trust me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
For the trade.
Safe equipment.
No, just
Yeah.
general public,
Yes,
Like-
this is true. Yeah.
customers.
Yep, they're a bit
like,
risky as well.
We look after caravan parks as well. And some of those parks
Yeah.
have got some shady characters in them.
Yes, and those
So-
shady characters would be doing some shady things, and those shady things are making your work environment not so safe.
Yeah.
So 100%. Yep. That is exactly what we're talking about. And even going into a work environment where there are shady people who do those not so savory things, that is in essence an unsafe work environment. So as a business, it's up to you to be able to put some controls in place. And controls can be, you're going to check in with that person. So if you're sending a plumber into a caravan park that is not the nicest, then it might be, what time he gets there, what time he finishes. And if he hasn't checked in with you at the end of that time period, then you do a welfare call or, something simple as that.
Yeah.
Basically.
I've had people removed, like out of workspaces. That's how bad it is. Like,
Okay.
that person's got to be off the park. We're not working here.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's fair enough. And that's fair enough. And that's probably the right call. I say probably 99.9% sure you weren't just getting them out because you felt like you needed them out. You were doing it on purpose for a reason to keep them safe. So that's great. The next one is, as a company, you do have to provide adequate and accessible facilities for the welfare of workers. All that basically means is the lovely things for them to go to the bathroom in, cold drinking water, somewhere for them to sit when they need to have their lunch that's, protected from the elements, that you provide them with, potentially a site shed or something like that where they can go. If your guys are on the road, then that's a little bit different. But it does mean that when they come back to a depot or a main area, that they have got somewhere they can, go to the bathroom and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Perfect. The next thing is, which Andrew, obviously you're doing by pulling them out of those work environments. So giving workers the necessary information, instruction, training or supervision to do their job safely. So that means making sure that they have been site inducted and telling them that, hey, we're going to be sending you into this, shady site where there may be some unsavourables. Here's what to do if XYZ happens. And for Carla, for you, it's like you're working in the workshop space. Here are the things that are required if you're operating XYZ bit of equipment, basically. And then the other part as a company that you're required to do is the consultation piece. And that consultation piece means anything that impacts the health and safety of workers, you do have to consult with them on. That's the kind of thing like if you're changing a procedure, if you're changing anything to do with their work environment, if you're changing their roster, their start times, their finish times, anything like that, it requires consultation. Understand, though, that consultation doesn't mean agreement or mutual agreement, I should say. It just means you specifically telling them about what you're wanting to change and then having a discussion. You don't have to bend over backwards to meet what their requirements are. You just have to show and be able to show down the track if anything does happen that, hey, we had a discussion, we listened to the feedback, and this was the decision we made. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Super. And anyone have an exciting example of consultation they've had with their workers? Okay, no worries. Toolbox talks, pre-shift meetings, kudos on the back when they're going out the door, anything like that. That's all consultation and feedback, and all counts towards making it all nice and lovely for the workers to come to work. So the officer duties, we asked ourselves those questions at the beginning of this. Those questions means you, as those people making those decisions, you answered yes. So Carla, David, and Andrew, you guys, and Jess as well, if you're making those decisions, you fall under the officer requirements. And that means that you have to show what is fancily called as due diligence. But there's two things that basically means. It means you need to make sure that your workers and anyone else that is coming onto your workplace, regardless of whether they are subcontractors, etc., are protected against harm, and that you as a business have safe work systems, as we were talking about earlier, in place. And that does incorporate having procedures and documented processes for things. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Daniel, do you want to run through how everyone can meet their duties?
Yeah. So as Georgina's been touching on, there's a lot of duties you have, but meeting them is kind of a process that you're probably following most of anyway, but putting some structure behind it makes sense. So obviously the first part about meeting any of the duties is understanding what you have to do, what you have to meet. So like, this is a great way of starting to do that. Also going through legislation, depending on what your area is, and understanding what is best practice. So WHSQ and the relevant regulator in each state have codes of practices, which are essentially the things that are best practice. So that's if they were coming to your workplace and try and decide whether you're doing the right thing or not, that would be one of the things they would go to and refer to as the standard, really. So if you're meeting that, you're doing all right, and that's where you should really go to get that. Once you understand what you're supposed to be doing, you really want to be understanding your risk management. So what actually are the risks and the hazards that are faced by your business? So you probably know these from talking to the guys, and definitely Andrew from doing the work yourself. But what you need to be doing from your officer and your PCBU point of view is tying that together in a way that can be used to understand and then justify what you're doing. So the easiest way and the general way is to put together a bit of a risk register and get together with you guys and just highlight everything that can hurt you, go through everything and what's the likelihood, the consequence, and what could come out of that, and start to use that as a picture of what you're doing and what the risks are and where you need to focus. You probably have a lot of controls and things in place just from like your swims and obviously the training and having the work experience doing the things. Putting it together is really helpful just as like the back end side of things. And what goes hand in hand with understanding all of these risks and knowing what you're doing is obviously providing and having the resources to do it. So from your point of view, you need to be providing the guys with everything to do that, which is the tools, the equipment, the training, having them like with the right things in the field so they can actually do everything they need to. That's kind of where it comes full circle. And obviously throughout all of this, and as I mentioned with some of them, having those processes in place that let that happen. So having the processes that make sure the guys are trained, make sure they're getting their swims, make sure you're checking their details and maintaining their licenses, having processes around making sure their equipment is up to scratch, service, the vehicles are all good, up and running, and just having those different systems in different areas to help you meet the obligations. So I know there's a lot of information, but does that make sense for everyone, or do you have any questions about any of the specifics there?
That's a good explanation.
Thanks.
Silence means consent, so good work. We'll keep going. Feel free if something jogs your memory and you do have a question on that, but we'll go into a bit more of the practicality sides of things. So as Daniel was saying, I guess what that looks like is understanding what are the hazards, and the hazards associated with what Carla is doing, for example, with steel and components and workshop spaces is very different to the plumbers going out and digging a trench or dealing with the biological hazards and things that are coming out of people's toilets, piping, etc. So understanding what those hazards are and making sure that you have a well-documented system for actually reporting on hazards and anything that may cause harm. So whether that be a hazard report form, whether that be an email to someone or other that says, hey, I saw a massive hole in the yard and it needs to be fixed. There's no legislative requirement on whether that looks like an email, whether it looks like a hazard reporting form. There is a requirement that there's a process and that the process is documented. So it's not telling you how to do it. It just says you need to do it in the first instance. The next part is that you have safe practices and procedures in place specific to those hazards. So obviously, if you've identified, hey, we're digging trenches, then unfortunately it means, you need to have a documented process. So a safe work method statement, a work instruction, or whatever you'd like in place that shows people how to safely do that particular task. How this all ties in with, and I will take it a step back, is when you started a business or when you have a business, the idea is that you have some sort of risk assessment, and you'll see that's our very first recommendation at the end. But the aim is that you should have identified what all the risks are associated with all the activities you do. And that normally involves bringing people into a room, having a chat and saying, all right, what activities are we going to be doing as a business? And what can we do to help keep our people safe when we look at those activities? And you document that all down into what's called either a risk assessment or a risk register, and it's a list. From that list, you will have determined this is how we keep people safe, and they are the controls that you've put in place. And perhaps you thought, well, hang on a minute, there are some things we're not doing that we can actually do that will help keep people a little bit more safe. Not that they're not safe in the first instance, but a little bit more to do that. And they're additional controls. And things that go on that additional controls or controls list are things like procedures, are things like the training, the supervision, making sure that you're giving them PPE. Those are all things that are required. And if you're not sure on perhaps what those minimum kind of industry best practice things are, codes of practice are the best practice documents that show you, hey, if you're doing excavation and trenching, here's what's required for excavation and trenching. In Queensland, our codes of practice are legislated, so they can be called on in court of law, and you can be asked, why are you not meeting this legislative requirement? In all the other states in Australia, they may or may not be legislated. However, the requirement is that you show either you're meeting them as industry best practice or something that is equivalent to that. So you can certainly argue, hey, I'm not doing what is code of practice in New South Wales, but if you don't meet that standard, you need to show what else you're doing and why it's equivalent or better to that standard. Does that make sense?
No, it's good.
Super. So yeah, codes of practice, Queensland legislated, other states industry best practice, and should definitely be guiding what you do as a business if they exist for the activities that you're doing. If they don't, then it falls back to those minimum requirements of having procedures and documented processes for managing those risks. If you don't have a risk register right now, then that's your first step in ensuring the safety of your workers. But you'll see there's a few other components that come through. So the training is obviously very important as well. And it's the provision of ongoing. So it's not, here's your induction, see you later, you're good to go because you've had 25 years of experience. It's the provision of that ongoing instruction. And that includes to your supervisors, regardless of how long they've been in the industry, to your managers and your workers. And I'm going to use an example, which is, I think you'll find really, really not so pleasant. Not so pleasant from the aspect of how did they get this payout. So I know of an employee that was working for an organisation that didn't have a manual handling procedure, what is now termed hazardous manual tasks. It's not manual handling. So hazardous manual tasks, as in how to safely lift items of any weight, not just, you know, it could be awkward, it could be heavy, it doesn't have to be heavy items. So this gentleman, he actually injured himself playing football on the weekend and put his shoulder out. He came to work on a Monday, picked up a 6-kilogram poly pipe and tore the ligaments and everything else in his shoulder, requiring surgery, and could no longer conduct basically manual activities in his current role. And subsequently, his further employment was then impeded by that as well. He ended up with close to $250,000 from the organisation as a workers' compensation payout because the company didn't have an adequate manual handling procedure. He was also caught playing football after he'd injured himself. When the workers' comp investigators went out, they identified that. They also identified he'd been in fights constantly as well. So if a worker has injured themselves outside of work, comes to work, and something at work exacerbates the non-work related injury, you as a business can still be held liable for that. And it's important that you have processes in place to mitigate. I can't say prevent because we can't prevent what people want to do and how they want to take things, but to mitigate the fact that that may happen. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, you did make a mistake there at the very start. You called him a gentleman. He's a grunt.
Yeah, and it confirms, Georgina, what we spoke about earlier. If documentation won't change behaviour, but it changes the conversation that you might have to have if there is an incident in your workplace.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and it's right. And David is correct. If you don't have a document, okay, fair call. You might come under question under, your regulator in your state. But if you've not had a conversation, you've not provided training, you've not gone out and said, hey guys, today, I know it's really shitty, but I'm going to show you how to push that broom around so you don't end up with a back claim on me. They're the kinds of things that show you've mitigated risk. You can't not do anything, but you do need to document and show that you have done something. What you do is up to you, but zero means a lot of zeros, basically. Yeah, you're right.
Documenting, do they have to sign that? Or is that just as simple as writing in my diary, have had discussion with boys about sweeping?
No, so, yeah,
Usually
that's also fine. I've been to court cases where I've been required to get literally 6 years worth of take fives, like our tick and flicks. But I've also been to court cases where they've asked for diary entries or toolbox talk records or meeting, those kinds of things. So the process around manual handling, though, it is documented. You'll need to look at, there is codes of practice in every state around hazardous manual tasks, and what's required. So check the code of practice to ensure, and what you're going to find is it's very vague. It's very general around just make sure that you're showing the risks. So it has to be specific to your industry. If you know the guys are picking up 20 kilo poly pipes every day, then there needs to have been some sort of process communicated to them on how to lift that safely. Are they twisting from their vehicle to put it on the ground? Are they digging trenches with, 6 kilo, crowbars or something? Those risks have to be relevant to the industry as well. So you can't just write, told him not to sweep left to right, right to left. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Got it? Yeah. Common sense is dead, Andrew, in case you didn't know.
Yeah,
yeah, and you know what? At the end of the day, we all like to think we've hired the right people. The right people are great until they're injured. Yeah, and their families and their livelihoods are on the line, and they might be the bestest employee. They could be your best friend in the world. Unfortunately, that best friend still needs to put food on the table, and that's when those relationships that you have may come. I'm not saying in all instances, I've just seen it where it has gone south. And in Queensland, we had the first case of industrial manslaughter was a man with the forklift. I'm not sure if you heard, but unfortunately, he got his best friend to help him out on the weekend. And on the weekend, his mate died helping him at his house. But because he was conducting a work activity, he went to jail for, I think it's 3 or 4 years, industrial manslaughter. So the family has to get something. There has to be something that comes from that. And the judge did make an example of that case. And it's used all around Queensland now and potentially Australia as, hey, this is what can happen. The forklift crushed him. He died and it was his best fate. So we don't want anyone, we, Lydia, Georgina, Daniel, we don't want anyone to have to experience that. And if it's as simple as in your diary, you write A to B to C to D, why would you not do that to protect your business, you as a person from going to jail, and also your family and your livelihood? So whilst, yes, as we discussed earlier, sometimes this stuff takes time, and it might mean 20 minutes before the start of the day, you get all the guys together and say, hey, just so you know, if you walk from A to B today, there is a hole in there. Try to keep it, go around it. We'll put some flagging up. We might put some cones in place. Do that. And in your diary or on a toolbox talk, piece of paper, you write down, spoke to the guys about A, B, C, D, E. That's enough. But if you do nothing, then that's what happens, unfortunately. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be reasonable and practical and all those kinds of things. It's not all this stuff in the sky, but at the same time, you do need to document it. It does need to be, pretty thorough. You don't want to leave anything for the judge to say, oh, actually, if you had done this, then maybe that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So from a communication standpoint, that is also what we're talking about. So you need to be having those talks with your guys if they're going out into different client sites or if they're in a workshop or a depot kind of space. These are the risks associated with where we work and what we're dealing with. But also if you have people coming into your site or on site, even the guys that deliver paper, they should know when you enter the yard, something as simple as a guard dog is there. Or when you enter our yard, we've got trucks coming and going, or we've got bits of poly pipe laying around, heads up, you may trip over. It is those kinds of things, unfortunately, that again lead to those really lovely court cases where delivery drivers had to enter an area. So they were going to a kitchen across a workshop space to get a cup of coffee and have their lunch, and unfortunately missed that there was actually forklift traffic coming and going. You'd think as a delivery driver you would know this, you're going into this area quite often. Unfortunately, it happened that one of them got his leg, I think, run over and ended up with something like 110 to 120K as well. So ended in a bad situation because here's the thing. When someone's coming onto your site, if I'm a visitor, if I'm Joe Bloggs walking in off the street, regardless of who I am, you're required to communicate the risks to me associated with walking around, delivering whatever to me. So I understand, hey, if I walk from A to B or B to C, here's what can happen. He wasn't communicated the risks. He was given a contractor's induction that only included a little bit of information, and it failed to include the main things on that site that had the potential to kill him, which was that forklift movement within that warehouse area. Some of the things they put in place after that were delineated walking kind of zones for them. Forklifts, you know, making sure your forklift has its rotating beacon, its beeping horn, hand signals, all that kind of fun stuff that goes into place. So you don't have to have a gazillion controls, but you do have to have some control. And one of those is communicating what you have in place to prevent people from having harm come to them. The next thing is allowing time and resources to health and safety. So if you have a health and safety committee, Carla, do you have enough employees for a representative at all, or?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it would be a good idea.
Okay.
But at the moment, I guess our foreman is my go-to.
That's perfect. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like a documented, you know, health and safety representative. It could be, like you said, if you're using your foreman, you know, they know to come to him with any workplace health and safety issues and vice versa. And once someone says they would like to have a health and safety committee or, you know, health and safety representative, normally that triggers the process. But Andrew, you've only got, would you say 4 employees, 5 including Jess?
No,
4 including me.
Yeah.
Oh, 4 including you. Or Jess, you've got 4 employees including Andrew, however we want to work this. However it is. So yes, sometimes with smaller organizations, there's no need. The need actually arises from normally if someone says, you know what, I think we need like a committee. Unfortunately, that does under legislation trigger the requirement for there to be a little vote and determine whether or not you're going to have like a health and safety representative and go from there. So larger organizations normally do have, you know, departments, and they'll be like, we want Joe Bloggs. He's a little bit of a, you know, sometimes a whinger, or he's really outspoken. Let's use him as our person with management to come and talk about those health and safety issues. When you're small, when you've got 4, I hope and I presume you would have no issues in going to any one of those 4 people and saying, hey, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and let's talk about it. So it should hopefully be easier. And then the last thing is making sure that you regularly monitor and have that auditing of anything health and safety related. So if you're the boss, Andrew, in the loosest sense of the word boss, going out to sites where the guys are working and understanding, is there anything particularly that might actually contribute to their work health and safety risks? You know, are they dealing with anything bad, or do they come back to you and say, hey, I went to that really, you know, cagey caravan site. Here's what I encountered. And then you literally write it down and say, right, we're not sending our guys back to that. And you've eliminated the hazard there by doing that. So those kinds of things means you're actually doing what's required. As Daniel said earlier, whilst it looks like there's a gazillion things under legislation that you have to do, you're actually meeting that by talking to the guys, eliminating the hazards or dealing with them accordingly, sending them only in daylight hours or midnight call outs not happening. Those kinds of things are controls. But remember, you should have a risk register that says we will be doing nighttime work. And one of the controls beside that is, no nighttime work allowed, or nighttime work will have the phone calls or something like that. So it should be documented somewhere. Risk control is X, Y, Z, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Bananas.
So
yes.
when you say we should have this document, we need to do this document ourselves. Is there like a body, like a corporation that
These guys
does the documents? Okay. Yeah. So
yeah, look, we've got templates. We can do it for you. We can teach you how to. There's a whole heap of things. It doesn't have to be a whole kit and caboodle of 25,000 hours worth of work. It literally is. We could send you a template. You can go online and Google it. It just depends on how involved or not involved and what the kinds of things are. And it's really not that difficult for you yourself to actually do. It's more, it needs to be done.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can help you with that if that's something you want. Hold that thought though, because at the end of this, I will tell you like what we're happy to do for you. And perhaps this might be where you would like to use us, because we are offering our services to you free of charge, basically. So keep that in mind if that's something you would like to do.
All right.
Yeah. Daniel, do you want to run through? So it looks like there's a whole heap of stuff, unfortunately, for owners of businesses and as an employer you have to do. Bear in mind, though, that workers do also have some requirements. So I'll get Daniel to run through the 4 little baby duties that your employees have to listen to compared to what we all have to do as business owners.
Yeah. Thanks, Georgina. Yes, as we've gone over all of the different duties, different requirements, obligations of the business owners, so the PCBUs and the duty holders, the workers have responsibilities that really do closely mirror the ones of the workers. So the most, like the overarching one is they have to take reasonable care of their own safety and safety of others at work and in the workplace. So what that really means is that they have to be aware of hazards, they have to communicate if they see things, they have to follow the processes and procedures they're agreed to, and their training and their instruction, the processes and those systems that we have in place for them, and not do anything reckless. They can definitely be held accountable if they were to deliberately dig a hole, not tell anyone about it, and then someone else came along and fell into it, hurt themselves. Because they're not following any of the reasonable steps of their training, their education, the company policies, the procedures, the clients and sites procedures, they can personally be held accountable for that because they breached this duty. What goes along with that is they obviously have a duty to comply with the reasonable instructions. So again, they have to be consulted in the development of the instructions and processes. So putting your swims together and putting together, or even just understanding how they're going to go out and operate. So if they're like laying the pipes for the plumbers, understanding that they have to be consultative in, they have to understand it, and then they have to comply with what has been agreed to. So that is the point here. Your processes are what you've all consulted and agreed on. They have to follow them. If they don't think it's correct, that's when they should raise it and go into the consultation point, but they're going to follow it. And the last duty is that they have a duty to cooperate with reasonable policies and procedures, similar to what I was saying before with the instructions and understanding what has been agreed on. They have to follow that. If they don't follow it or they don't agree with it, then there's another conversation to go about and change that. So does that make sense for everybody? It's realistically the same kind of ideas. Take care of your own health, take care of the other people's health, follow policies and procedures that are agreed to and are part of the company.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bananas. And the regulator in each state, depending on how nice they're feeling, when they come to construction sites, when they come to manufacturing workshops, when they come to various sites, and they can just randomly pop up on you in case you don't know, when they do come out, they will actually check, are people wearing PPE? Do you know what the process is for the job that you're doing? And they can fine people, and I say individuals. Obviously, the organisation, yes, can come under a lot of questions and there can be fines and infringement notices. But individuals, and I have seen recently in Queensland, $431 to a person for not wearing PPE. So when you're talking to employees, yes, it can be a little bit funny. And yes, it sounds like it's a joke to say to someone, hey, you got to wear your hard hat and your gloves, your glasses, or something, seems really trivial. But at the end of the day, you're telling them that for a reason. And if they are going down the line of not following those policies and procedures, including wearing PPE, that fine is on them as a person. Your organisation, may be flagged obviously as having, workers that are not following policies and procedures, and you may find WorkSafe and the regulators in each of the states visit you a little bit more often. But at the end of the day, 100%, as Daniel said, workers and each of those individuals can be held personally liable as well. So bear that in mind when you are communicating. Don't use it as a scare tactic, but there are some people that may need some little bit of nudging, if you get what I mean, to help them understand that as well. So when it comes to what we would like you to do and check, like what was the purpose of having this, I kind of thought there were 4 things realistically that I would like for you and for all of those people that do tune in later on, to kind of have a think about within the business. And the first one is 100%, like we were talking about, Jess and Andrew, having that business risk assessment, that one document, Excel spreadsheet, whatever it looks like, Word doc, it doesn't even matter. It just needs to be documenting all the risks associated with the activities that you do as a business. And that includes having vehicles on the road. That includes nighttime work. That includes office work. That includes digging trenches. Literally every task that you guys complete needs to be documented, and the risks associated with those particular tasks then have controls that go along with it. So that's the very first thing that any business, and it's not just tradies, it's not just, it's any business that all should have in place, so that you can demonstrate you know what your risks are and you do have something in place to control those risks and prevent your workers from coming into any sort of harm whatsoever. The next thing that we recommend that you do is signing up to any alerts or news articles that come out of the regulators from each state. So WorkSafe, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, all the regulators in every state. And also if you have individual bodies like in New South Wales, iCare, they will send out different articles and things to help you maintain that little requirement we spoke about and keeping up to date with your knowledge. Whenever legislation changes, you'll get an update. So the psychosocial risks, went live and updates went out to everyone who had signed up for a newsletter. I know that most times they will just sit in an inbox, but those things are things that if you're heading to ISO accreditation, if you're wanting to play with the big boys and those larger organisations that have strict requirements, you'll definitely need to show that you are signed up. But even if you want to make sure you're covering off that duty, I would highly recommend that you sign up and start getting those news alerts coming through. The other thing is, from an incident perspective, like, unfortunately the rollover with the excavator, do you have an incident management and injury management process? Do you have something that if you really wanted to, you could call the doctor right now and say, hey, we know we've had a worker who's injured himself. What happened? Or, could you give me a rundown on what you think, or, that kind of thing. So having a process that not only covers the incident itself and what happened, what went wrong, how to prevent it from reoccurring, but also the injury management process. So having things where a privacy consent form to allow you to talk to any representative in that whole entire process about the worker and the worker's progress towards returning to work, if that's what happened. Do you understand how long the worker has? And do you understand that even if they don't report the incident to you, that could still turn into a workers' compensation claim? Sometimes in most jurisdictions, up to 2 years after the actual incident takes place. You might not have known that Joe Bloggs twigged his back at work, and then 7 months down the track, all of a sudden a claim comes up against your business, and he's wanting to take it further and get payments for ongoing physio or ongoing XYZ. So you need to ensure that you have systems and processes like an injury management and incident management process in place to be able to back yourself up should anything happen down the line and someone decides, you know what, I've run out of money. I can't afford to pay for my physio that's been going on for such a long amount of time, and here's what I'm going to do. It's not a nice thing to talk about, but it does happen. And again, whilst we all, make sure we hire the right people are right until a point in time where they're not. And then they decide, okay, I'm doing X, Y, Z, and to come back. The final thing here is the resourcing and or training. So if you can't hire a health and safety professional, my recommendation, and I say this to all the businesses that we currently work with, is one of you physically go and do the certificate for in workplace health and safety, so that you understand the minimum requirements when it comes to health and safety, and you can then communicate that out to your employees as required. If you can't do that, then 100%. Oh, sorry. Yep, you're
can
right.
I interrupt? How long does that take? What's the course like? Is it just a day's?
No, unfortunately. So it's roughly to do face-to-face in Queensland, it's a 7-day face-to-face course where you get your certificate at the end of 7 days, and it costs roughly between $1,000 to $2,000 in total. You can do it online. So you can do 1 day a week over 7 weeks, and you can do it online. However, bear in mind with anything online, the quality, the standard of work that you're going to get is very different. And the online version has about 120 to 130 assessments. So it's a lot more, like in depth. I'm a certified trainer assessor for Pinnacle Health and Safety, which is across, like, you've got them in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales and WA. And I'm giving you my course details. So the certificate for in workplace health and safety with Pinnacle is that price and that length, and that's the requirement. The online version is not the same. And 100%, if you have the funds available, go and sit a 7-day course, get your certificate at the end of it. You're guaranteed to get a trainer who will talk you through those assessments and make sure you walk away with the piece of paper at the end of it. Otherwise, doing it online is a very elongated process, and you have to wait for that feedback to come back. So, but as directors of the business, if you can't afford the time to do that, or you want to aim for that as a goal, 100% pick up the phone. You've got our details now. Even, providing guidance is absolutely nothing. If you want us to come and do a scope of works, that's a different prerogative. But the aim is that have some understanding. It's sad. We do talk with business owners that have no idea when it comes to health and safety. But what we would like is for you to understand that you do have no idea and put your hand up for help, as opposed to being ignorant and then someone falls off a roof, someone falls in a trench, someone cuts themselves using, a welder or something, and then you're left saying, well, I didn't know XYZ should have been in place. It's better to ask for help now and foot that bill. And it's costly money-wise, it's costly time-wise, but sometimes it's better to do that now to save yourself that payout at the end of the day when the worker decides, hey, I can't do this anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sucks. I'm not using it as a threatening thing. I'm just saying, look, from experience, this is what happens. And people hire their best mates, their sisters, their brothers, whatever. Those relationships turn sour. And at the end of the day, you need to protect your livelihood and your loved ones first and foremost before you consider anyone else outside of that circle.
Yeah.
So something to listen to. Daniel didn't see this slide. I snuck it in at the last minute. I have my own podcast. It's aimed at people like you to give you tangible advice and guidance. Check it. It's free. It's on Spotify. It's on all your normal podcast providers, as well as on YouTube. And every week I release either a special guest episode or Georgina talking about hazard management or risks or whatever. So feel free to download it and listen to it if you would like to hear my voice again. If not, it is video, but there are no transcripts, so you'll just have to look at my photo for a little while longer.
And they're nice and short. They're like 20 minutes each,
correct.
30 minutes each.
Yeah, I should have said that. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah. So the aim is that you can listen to them in your car on the way to site. You can listen to them in the office. You can do them while you're on the treadmill. Most of them are all of them are less than 40 minutes long, and they're short, sharp, to the point, and aimed at anyone and giving that tangible guidance and advice that you can go and literally walk into your workshop and go, hey guys, I'm going to implement X, Y, Z and keep workers safe. So because you all came, all three of you, and listened to what we have to say, and why I said just to hold on was we thought about what we could give you for, and saying thank you for taking the time to listen to us talk for the last hour. And basically what we're offering is a 30-minute consultation with us. So you get to pick up the phone, tee up a time with us where you can ask whatever you want, or we can physically work on stuff with you for half an hour. I can't promise that you're going to get a whole entire risk assessment. In fact, I'm more than certain we will not be able to get a whole entire risk assessment documented in that half an hour. But what we will be able to do is I could perhaps send you a template. I could talk you through what's required for that document, and then you have that tool to go and utilize. Or the incident, for example, if there's something with that you need advice and guidance on. So for Carla, for Jess and Andrew, for David, if you need anything, David, the idea is that you can call us, we'll talk to you for half an hour in whatever it is that you would like, whatever scope of works it is, provide you with the guidance, advice, and potentially do the tangible work for you in that time, or allow you the open forum to do so. Just as a thank you for listening to Georgina and Daniel rave about what we're passionate about, health and safety, for the last 45 minutes to an hour. Did that make sense to everyone? Is there any questions, concerns?
That was really good. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Very informative.
It's a lot.
Hopefully it wasn't too
It's a
much.
lot.
It is a lot.
All I want to reiterate to everybody is we're doing it anyway for the majority of things. We just don't have it documented.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Yes.
So
yeah,
because it can seem very. I remember when I first started supervising, it can be very overwhelming very quickly, especially when you're in your own business and you've got your house on the line.
Yeah.
I think just don't overcook it, and I really like the way that Georgina and Daniel have explained this. That there are things that need to be covered off, and they're very important to do so, but. Following a simple process and having that simple process documented, that you've got evidence that you have processes in place, you're not that far away from it, because you're doing it in your head most days anyway.
Yeah.
We just got to provide evidence that that's taking place. So I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So unfortunately, it is it's not the best professional term to use, but it is a sucky way of looking at things, like using the regulator as, hey, if you end up going to court and proceedings happen, these are the things they're going to look at. But hopefully it gives you an idea, though, of how you can protect yourself, your incomes, your livelihoods first and foremost, and put some systems and processes in place. If you do want to take us up on that complimentary consultation, I'm going to flick you through all of our details again, and everyone else that's signed up will get this recording as well. So feel free to shoot an email back and we can tee up a time. Or if you have any questions, feel free to stay online now. But we'll shoot you through an email with the recording attached. You can listen to it again. If there's anything else that jogs your memory or you would like assistance with, give us a call, send us a message, shoot us an email back, and we'll tee up a time for to run through whatever it is you would like assistance with. And if there is further work to be done, happy to provide you with some guidance on what needs to be done. Or if you would like us to physically come, we go all around Australia, as in we physically Daniel's been to WA to help out on some shutdown works. We've got work in Gladstone, we've got work in Victoria, we've got work everywhere at the moment. So don't feel like we can't assist you because you're located in XYZ area. If you physically need us to come and do work, unfortunately, we don't do it out of love, but we are reasonable when it comes to everything that we do. And like I said, that guidance, that quick 5-minute call when the poo hits the fan is not a chargeable thing. You just call, say, Georgina, I need XYZ. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're on there, Daniel the same, and we can help you with that. But otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, that's the conclusion of our webinar.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Georgina,
Glad you guys.
I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn.
For certain.
Keen to have a chat.
Super, not a problem, David. That would be fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
No worries. Thanks,
Yes.
guys. I'll stop
Bye.
sharing the
See ya.
screen now.
See ya.
Thank
Ta-da.
you.
See you later.
Any questions?
Do you have any questions? Oh, who's gone? Andrew and Jess, are you still there? Did they hang up, Daniel?
Carla's still here? I think everyone's gone.
Ah.
It's just us. They always jump ship.
Yep, they're like, damn, health and safety for an hour. That's it. Quick turn off. How do you think that went?
Can be a bit dry. I think it went well. I think you gave a really good presentation. I know it's your bread and butter, teaching people the stuff, but it's really good, and I think they got a lot out of it.
Yeah. So why is this recording? Oh, stop recording. I was like, what is happening?